Okay, guys, I am back. Hopefully you're able to stay with me, and I'm going to just talk over the PowerPoint because I don't know how to share it. So we'll see how it goes. Okay, you'll be able to come back. I'll wait for you guys and go from there. All right. So what I'm trying to do is share with you some of the pictures that I have with me in Israel and some of the information that I learned on my tour when I was going out. And I'm going to talk over the pictures because I really want you to see it. It is imperative when we study the Bible to consider, and I got to learn how to work with this thing. Yeah, it is working. Hallelujah. Let me see if you can hear me okay.
See it.
All right, good deal. So you can hear it. So I'm going to be talking over the pictures, all right? Because I really want you to get this. And when we study scripture, sometimes we don't, by not being aware of the geography of the Bible, or the city of Jerusalem, or Israel for that matter, sometimes we don't really understand the importance of where everything is. You know, when you read in Jeremiah, and I'm going to go right here to the screen and follow the cursor, hopefully you'll be able to follow it. You know, and you're looking at the city of David in the bottom here, and towards you, you see the Temple Mount. I know there's a lot of controversy as to where the Temple Mount is and compared to the city of David. So follow my mouse there real quick. But there's so many things we need to learn that I want to share with you. This model in Jerusalem, where's the Jerusalem Museum, really helps you get a glimpse of first century Jerusalem. And what people don't realize is, you know, once you understand what the upper city, the lower city, the city of David was, or what it represented, and the walls and the temple and how big it was, then when you read the Bible, it makes more sense. And a lot of the arguments that people are having in regards to temple location will go by the wayside. First of all, something that we need to remember: the walls of Jerusalem, anything within the walls of Jerusalem is holy area. You know, in Passover, for example, if the Passover lamb cannot be eaten outside of the walls of Jerusalem. So if you want to eat the lamb, you have to do it inside the walls. Let's look at the city of David, for example. The city of David here on the bottom right is by the right by the Genome Valley, in the corner of the Kidron and the Genome Valley. And what people don't realize is at the time of David, sure, that area was known as this Zion. But when Solomon expanded on the temple, and he built the temple, he expanded the walls because of growth population. Everything within the city walls becomes Zion. The temple is known as Zion. The people are known as the daughters and the sons of Zion. So when the walls were expanded, as you see it there in the first century, you know, on the left side of your screen, you're going to see what Herod lived, the palace, which is near the Jaffa Gate today. And there's a police station right above it. You know, anything within the walls in Jerusalem we call Zion. As a matter of fact, the expression daughter of Zion, you know, really in what that's reference in regards to geography, any villages around the walls, outside the city walls, that is near Jerusalem, they were called daughters of Zion. That is the expression for anything that is now within the walls. So understanding the geography alone would allow us to really get a glimpse of what it looked like in the first century. Anybody who says that the temple is in the city of David clearly did not understand topography and geography. There's not enough space to put in the temple building. As a matter of fact, if you look at, I'm going to try to see if we can see it on follow my cursor. Hopefully you're able to follow it. There's some technological things that I'm trying to learn here anyway. But right south of the Hurde Gate, which is south of the gates of the entrance of the temple, if you come right from the south walking up towards the temple, there's a wide open area, which is the southern steps. It's called as the southern steps right here. But right in this area right here, when they used to have a hippodrome in the time of the Roman Empire, in the time of Herod, right? Now people are saying that the temple was in this area, when in fact is the Akra. They found in the Givati parking lot, right in that area, is called the Akra. And the Akra is actually a huge building that the Greeks built sometime during the Seleucid kingdom. And Shimon the Maccabean, he destroyed it after the victory against the Greeks. So many times we really do not understand geography, so we're not really aware of the differences in the geography. Clearly, this is much different in the first century than the time of Nehemiah, even the time of Solomon. So we're going to show you that in a minute. The next picture is trying to show you the Shin within the city of Jerusalem, the old city of Jerusalem. Number 4 would be the Kidron Valley. You see, what's amazing about Jerusalem is that it's built among valleys, and there's a high peaks in them valleys, and it makes a natural defense. So on the right, number 4 is the Kidron Valley. And then number 5, which right now you don't really see, because during the time of Herod, he built up the whole area, the Thoropian Valley, or the cheesemaker, or the Thoropian Valley, and that ran all the way from the pool of Shiloah in the south, coming up north, all the way by the western wall, which was the retaining wall during the time of Solomon, and then going towards the left on top. So that was the Thoropian Valley. During the time of Solomon, that western wall did not exist. During the time of the Hasmonean, that western wall did not exist. That western wall is a retaining wall built by the Romans. By Herod in the Roman style, because they had the huge Roman influence. If I go to the previous slide, you see what I mean. Let me go back to the other one. I'll see if I can go back to the previous slides. So you see what I'm saying? Clearly, the influence in Israel in the first century was very Roman. Please understand that. The construction, it's just like the time of the Greeks. A lot of the Greek construction took place. The time of the Nehemiah, which was very much a Persian influence. A lot of the construction had Persian influences. So depending on the temple, on the period, it had an influence on the construction of the city. So clearly in the first century, we have the influence of the Romans. So clearly, we see that evidence everywhere in the old city. It doesn't mean that there were not Jewish people there, and does not mean that the temple was not on the Temple Mount. It's just that Herod decided to expand on the Temple Mount, make expansion, and he decided to use the technology available to him at the time. All right. So let's continue. Let's move forward here, because I want to get to this. So we have number 4 is the Kidron Valley. Okay. Number 5 is the Thoropian Valley. You don't see that today. It's been built up. But back in the day, the walls of the old city of Jerusalem, or Sion, the city of David, they had a valley going down, so it served as a line of defense. And then we have number 6, which is the Genome Valley, and this is a very important valley, because at the bottom of that valley there, that's where they used to do worship to Moloch at the ancient time. So understanding the geography and the topography is extremely paramount for us to talk about temple function, temple service, and temple language. If we do not understand the topography of the land, we're not going to really recognize the importance of why the temple was on the top of the mountaintop. On the mountaintop. Clearly says that in the book of Ezekiel, on the mountaintop. The city of David is not on the mountaintop. Is on the bottom of that ridge there. So let's move on to the next one. We have now, this is really interesting that I really wanted to show you. This is really why I did the live today, because Joseph Good, who's my temple teacher, he took me to Jerusalem last February, and he told me, you're going to really enjoy today. And he took me into a convent north of the city, right outside the walls of the northern part of the Temple Mount, into a convent, and underneath of it is the archaeological finds of the Strothian Pool, which is a remnant of the Antonia. But what's really interesting is that there we found what you're looking at right now, which is called the Games of the King. What we saw, let me take you to the next picture so you see what I mean for context. What you're looking at there is the original Via Dolorosa, the original way of the pain in which Yeshua was taken. Okay, that is found almost 30 feet below ground from the regular street today. If you get out of the northern part of the Temple Mount today, and you're walking in the Arab Quarter, heading to what the church says is the Via Dolorosa, down by the Islamic area, Muslim area, there is a convent that you walk through, that you walk by, and you will never know that underneath that convent you find the first century street. This is the street that Yeshua walked in when he was judged by the Romans. And how was he judged? Well, what they did, they will play this game. It's called the King's Game. Okay? And what they will do, they will put on the ground a game, and the person being captured will become the chess piece. Okay? So right here on the bottom, right near where that street was that I just showed you, what you're looking at is first century street. Okay? This is the area where they took Yeshua to be tortured. And they will put this on the ground and they will play the game. It's called the King's Game. It was designed for complete shaming of the person. And they will cast lots. And then once the number will come on the lots, then what they will do, they will move the person in the game, and they start doing to the person what the penalty and the torture was. So when you follow the torture of Yeshua, you follow along those verses. That's exactly how they will do it. They will put a crown of thorns. That was one of the penalties. They would mock him by putting a Roman garment, a red garment, represent the kingship, things like that. You know what I mean? It's all designed just to shame the person to the worst possible way. So what we have here is literally the place where they took our master Yeshua, and we were there. And we can understand now the atrocity of the torture that they did to him. It was all by design. It was all a way to shame him because he was accused of being king of the Jews. So therefore, that will be an affront to the Roman Caesar. And the game was done. And it was not done just to Yeshua. It was done to anyone who would proclaim to be of any kind of social status, to demean them and degrade them. The difference was that in this case, it was the actual son of the living Elohim that they're doing it to. So this, one of the examples that I do in taking people to my tour, that I take you to places where things actually happen. So if we go back to the previous, just to review, this is the street in the first century. You get to put your feet on first century street in which they took Yeshua, okay? Not the one they have today. That is a myth, and that is a theory by the Catholic Church and the church system. The real Via Dolorosa is actually 35 feet on the ground under a convent. And going back to the original, if you look at the emblems that it has there, it says king in Greek. A large circle represents a crown. Then you have the top right says the double square represents a dice, and the soldiers would throw markers into the square. This black line is thought to represent the lifeline. The line crossing towards the end represent a sword which cut the lifeline. This part of the game means death for the prisoner, and the scorpion is a symbol of the Roman legion. All right, so clearly what they did to Yeshua was by design. So let's move on. So we have this here. Now, what is this? What you see on the screen right now. What you see in the screen is actually a water drainage from the first century right by the pool of Shiloah. In the pool of Shiloah, where they have the archaeological finds since 2004, you see that that this was, you recognize it by the symbols. And you're literally looking at first century foundation and a drainage, water drainage. Now, why is this so significant? Because if I go to the next slide, what you're going to see here is the walkway, okay, first century walkway in which Peter, Paul, John, all the believers in Yeshua would have walked through in order to be welcome as Shiloach when the 33 districts of Israel will come to the feast, to the high holidays, and they will have to go to the Shiloach, and as Shiloach they will do the immersion, and then what they will do, they will wait for the priest, a representative from the temple, to come gather them, and then they'll walk in the street. What does that street look like? Let's go there. This is what the street looked like. You're looking at. I took my tour through here, and they finally kind of dug in the first century street up to a certain point, and then it went into the first century drainage system, which was like a sewer system back in the time of the Romans. And by the way, the Jewish people hid, during the conquest, they hid down in the sewer system. And once the Romans recognized that they were there, they sent the Romans in there to kill them. So what we're looking at on the screen right now is the first century street from the Shiloach going up to the southern part of the temple. And this is historical archaeology. This is archaeology. This is not theory. This is not speculation. And if the temple was in the city of David, why would this street goes all the way up to the southern steps where the first street level was back in the time? And this is really important that we recognize. So let me show you what it would have looked like. There is a fresco kind of showing how big the pool of Shiloah would have looked like in the first century. It was quite big, by the way, and it is quite impressive. And what we did, and let me show you another picture that shows you the route from the pool of Shiloah down here in the south, the city of David here on the right, and then that's the first century street, walking all the way up to the southern part of the temple. And by the way, this is a very important type of road, because this is the one that they will come doing the Parad Duma for the red heifer. They will send either a bull from the temple with a priest, with a young Kohen, with a young priest, to gather the waters at Shiloach. Remember, Shiloach means sent one. And Shiloach is found at the lowest part of the southern part of the mountain. So it was considered, it's right next to Gehenna, right next to the potter's fields. When Jeremiah says that go down to the potter's field, is actually the most cursed place in Jerusalem, because that's right by the corner of the Kidron and the Genome Valley, where they used to worship Moloch, and also that's the blood's field with Judas Iscariot bought. They purchased the field there for him, not for him, but with the money that he rejected. And by the way, Ananias is buried not too far from the Shiloach on the south of the city, one of the most cursed places on the earth. So this street is very significant, and this is what the rendering of the artists kind of think about what it would have looked like during the first century time. Now, I want you to notice the steps, and this is how we know this is first century, because you notice the steps. There's like a long way, and then there's two steps, a long way, and there's two steps. And they did it that way so people would not be able to run up. They have to just walk up. The same type of steps construction is found in the southern steps right at the entrance of the Hurda gates, okay? And you see what I mean here when you see the same thing. See two steps and then a little long one. You see two steps and a little long one. So what you're seeing here is the going up those steps in which people used to welcome you. The way they did it in the previous one, I'm going to show you here, when you will come for the feast, for first fruit, for Shavuot, Pentecost, and you're going up towards the temple, the people will welcome you. And according to the guides in Israel, they tell us that the people will leave like a white towel or handkerchief by the doors. And that was a sign of they had availability in their houses to host people, according to what they're telling us. So these are some of the things that we do on our tour to Israel. So this was a very important walk that we did, going up to Jerusalem, because the city of David and the Shiloach has been they've been working on it since 2004. And I remember when they began to do the digging on this, and they were talking about how big of a discovery it was. Just think about this, that our tour this year in Spanish, because my English tour couldn't walk up, but my Spanish tour, we were able to walk up the way that everyone would have walked up to go to Jerusalem in the first century. Now, it doesn't look like it today. This is part of the sewer system, because when you go back, let me explain something real quick. When you come this one, you start walking up, but up to a certain point, they can't go any longer. And I guess they have houses, I don't know what they have. And then it ties in with the sewer system or the drainage system in Jerusalem. And then what you do, it ends up in this one. Okay, and we walk all the way through, but we're walking on the same route that they would have walked in the first century to end up all the way by the southern steps, to be welcome into Jerusalem during the high holidays. Think about that. What a great honor that would be. So this is part of the walkway now. Okay, so it goes between the drainage system to the walkway, and what we see is evidence of ancient roadways and walkways to get to the city. And this is what it would have looked like. I showed you this earlier. So, the Gevati parking lot is where the red dot is. Okay? Well, the Gevati parking lot, and it's called the Gevati parking lot because that's what it was at the time they started digging, Gevati parking lot. That's where the red dot is right there. It's called the Akra. The Akra is a huge building that they actually found the evidence there now. And that was the Greek building that was destroyed. So when people saying the temple was down by the southern steps, they need to read a little history, because the evidence that's there does not line up at all. They don't have any of the evidence from temple there. No archaeological finds from anything from the temple functions ever were found in the city of David. Okay, everything is found. By the way, in that little walkway that I showed you, let me go back to it again real quickly. Down in these walkways, all the way towards the temple, they found evidence of one of the bells of the priests. I think it was there. I hope I'm not, giving you the wrong information here right now. But it's really fascinating that we know that they used those sewer systems and and those things because of the Romans during the time of the Roman siege. The Israelites were getting underground because they knew the city, and the Romans did not. So this history is extremely important, and we need to consider to look into this information. Now let me go a little bit into what Josephus says in regards to the foundation trenches. He says in Antiquities, in Jewish Antiquities, Book 8, paragraph 63, he says, "And so the king had the foundation of the temple laid very, very deep in the ground, the material being strong stones capable of resisting the wear of time, which would grow to the soil and be a base and a support for the structure to be erected upon it, and which, because of their strength from below, would without difficulty bear the great mass resting on them and the precious ornaments, the weight on which they were no less than that of the other parts, designed for height and massiveness and for graceful beauty and magnificence as well." So again, we're talking about the retaining walls. So let me read you real quickly from Matthew 24, because people have selective reading. When they read, they don't study the temple, so a lot of people don't know the difference between a retaining wall and the actual western wall of the temple. The fact that the western wall is standing does not by any chance take away Yeshua's prophecy about the stones being destroyed and the temple being destroyed. I'm going to read you Matthew 24, verse 1 and verse 2. Actually, verse 1 says, "Then Yeshua went out and departed from the temple." Okay, and his disciples came to him to show him the buildings of the temple. A retaining wall is not a building. A retaining wall is a retaining wall. And the text is talking about the temple buildings, Beit Ozrot, Beit Avtinas, Beit Hanitzot, Beit Hamoket, and all the other buildings that were there at the time of the temple. Do we know the temples? Do we know the functions? Do we know their location? Do we know where they're at? So we take a verse And now we'll say, well, they were moving away from the temple. But it says the disciples were showing him the buildings of the temple. Well, how high were the temples? How wide were the temple? What were their functions? What did they look like? They don't know. So they now talk about the Western Wall as being the temple, when we know that the Western Wall was an extension. It was added by Herod, and he used Roman technology, and he leveled the whole mountaintop. The whole mountaintop, he leveled it in order for him to make it bigger. He extended on the north, he extended on the west, he extended on the south. Okay, but the buildings of the temple itself, he hired over 1,800 priests, the Kohen, so they can build the temple buildings, because no one can go in there except for the priests. And they took them a year and a half to remodel and to beautify the temple buildings, but they cannot change their structure or their pattern, okay? Because it's a tavnit, is a pattern. They cannot change their function. They cannot change it. But the outer part, like the perimeter of the temple, outside the walls of the temple itself, like the retaining walls on the south, on the north and the west, Herod actually expanded on it. On the east, he did not. He expanded on the northeast, but the original eastern wall he did not expand on. Why? Because there was no way to expand anywhere else because of the Genome Valley. Now, what you're looking at right now is a very interesting picture. Why? Because I just read you from Josephus about the trenches of the temple. Now, if the temple was in the city of David, how come they didn't find any trenches whatsoever for any huge structure, other than some of the buildings they did that would not hold the weight or the scope of size of the temple? What you're looking at are pictures that are at the bottom of the first century street. Okay, when you go to Jerusalem, you go to the Western Wall. When you actually go pray to the wall, you're actually 30 to 40 feet above ground level of the first century. You are praying halfway through the wall. Okay, when you go to the southern steps, then you go to the southwest corner of the temple. There you see Robbins' arch. Let me take you to a previous one so I can give you a little bit more geography here. Okay. All right, so as you look in here, you go up the street all the way past the red dot, okay? And you see to that big old arch right over there. Right underneath of it, underneath the arch, there was a first century street. On the left of the arch, there were some shops. On the right, there were some shops. People can do business. And then what I'm talking to you about is actually the trenches and the stones that you were looking at is 35 feet below that first street level. We're talking about pretty deep. So what you're looking at right here is 30 feet below that first century street that you saw just now. Okay, this is very important, because if you understand ancient constructions, you'll know that the finish of the stones determine its time period. So these are the foundation courses of the Western Wall. This is like 30 feet below the Western Wall that you see today when people go pray. This is way down there. And there's another one that I want to show you here. You see, this is exactly what Josephus talks about when Herod built the temple. You don't find this in the city of David. So if Josephus tells us he'll build deep trenches to build those retaining walls, well, here it is. Okay? And these, by the way, I took these pictures, by the way. The last picture and the one coming up right now, I took myself. Okay? Because I was there. And you notice the finish. Now, this is definitely below ground level in the first century. So you notice that the finish is not as nice because no one sees them. They're way down there. Okay? So please understand that this is Herodian stones because of the edges right over here that you see. Now, they didn't finish the middle very smooth, but the edge of it are Herodian for sure. Okay? And what we see here is where the Western Wall is today. Okay, well, the Western Wall, this is below the Western Wall. towards the bottom of the western wall right there. Some of those huge courses, huge stones are so big that not even a modern crane can pick them up today. Okay, so this is walking north along the western wall, what used to be the first street level of the Herodian Valley. That used to be the Herodian Valley. It was filled in. Now they put a retaining wall, okay, an extension. And I'm going to show you the original western wall in a minute here. I pray this is making sense to you guys, and that is a blessing to you, and that you're enjoying it, because this is what I cover in Israel. This is where I take people. I don't take people to places that nothing happened. I take you to places that you can go and see it for yourselves, so you can learn. This is the essence of archaeology and history and topography and geography. Okay, so let me take you to another picture that's really interesting. All right, you see, this is looking from south to north. And remember that the temple was built on different topography. There are different elevation on that Temple Mount. Okay, and what you see here in the bottom of this wall was the original remnant of the Zoeg. The Zoeg was the wall that divided from strangers, from foreigners. That beyond that point is where you will go into the Geo, which is an area in which it was a passageway, like a walkway, before you went into the temple itself. And this is, the Muslims are not very bright, okay? The Muslims basically, they left this here. Okay, they just they build on top of it. They never change anything. They just build on top of it, okay? And if you understand temple geography, this sticks out like a sore thumb. You know, when you walk on the Temple Mount, we can trace where every cistern is. We know which building would have been above those cisterns. And when I saw this, it was easy to identify based on the dimensions, and you know exactly what was there, and that was the Zoeg. The next picture is going to be the original western wall. What you see here on the ground, this is on the west side of the Haram, which is the dome. Going down, this is the original western wall. Lee Rittmeyer and some of the archaeologists all agree, and Joseph Good, they all agree that this was the original western wall. Let me show you the other one, because sorry about that ugly face right there, but I'm pointing to the wall. I stood on it. I took this picture last year in February. So what we're looking at here is the original western wall. Now, from this picture to the left, everything was added by Herod later on. Herod actually filled up the whole mountain, the area where the temple, was not, and he filled it up, and he added the retaining walls on the west, on the south, on the north, and the northeast, part of the northeast. So what you're looking at right here, ladies and gentlemen, is the original western wall of the temple. And if you understand construction and the way the stones look in the first century, then you can recognize the finish. Okay, the finish was, you can tell, was different. Okay, the stone is different. It was Hasmonean. Okay, it was some extension there. All right, so this is the picture again, and really, this is really it. This is what I have to show you right now. Let me go right here real quick and try to get back to me. See if I could do it here real quick and change this. But as you can see,